Hello everybody, welcome back to American Textbook Reading. My name is Brian Stuart, and in this lesson we're looking at Science Book 4, Lesson 7. And Lesson 7 is about changes on Earth. So in this lesson you will discover how the Earth's surface changes, and also how ice can change rocks. So let's begin. In the vocabulary section, our first item is actually two words. It is a phrasal verb, soak into. What is a phrasal verb? A verb plus a preposition. So verb plus preposition is a phrasal verb. And English has a lot of phrasal verbs that correspond to a certain specific idea. In this case, we have soak into, right? You could just say soak, but into kind of gives it a more special meaning. It means for a liquid to move into something and make it wet. So if it's raining and the water soaks into your clothes, then you are thoroughly wet. It's not good. It's miserable, right? So soak into, for a liquid to move into something and make it completely wet with that liquid. Okay. Next, we have another phrasal verb. Wow, this lesson has many phrasal verbs. Here we have wear away. So wear is our verb, away is the preposition. Wear away. Wear away means to cause something to become thinner, smaller, or weaker over time. So really everything wears away. Right? If you have a toy, for example, and there's a new paint job on the toy. So the paint is shiny and new at the beginning, but over time, as you leave your toy out in the sun, or maybe it gets wet, or as you play with it, it rubs up against the walls of your room, or the carpet, or the floor of your room. And over time, you know, the paint wears away. It becomes thinner. It becomes weaker, and sometimes the paint will wear away completely, and then you can see the metal underneath the paint. By the way, most phrasal verbs in English, verb plus preposition, have another more formal word that corresponds to them. And I should mention it for this word. Wear away has a more scientific word that we usually use, it's very common, and that is erode. It's one word, erode. And from erode, that's a verb, we get the noun erosion. And that's exactly what we are talking about in this unit. When we talk about wind, water, other forces acting on, for example, rocks, and the rocks over time, they fall down, they become smaller, they become weaker, or the rock layer becomes thinner, we call that erosion. That process is called erosion, and we can say the rocks erode, but it means that they wear away. All similar ideas. Okay, good. Next we have glacier. Now glacier is a noun, right? Glacier is a large body of ice that moves slowly over land. Did you know that about 10,000 years ago, before 10,000 years ago, most of the earth was covered with ice? There were huge glaciers covering large surfaces of the earth. And of course, this ice moved very slowly. Of course, if the ice forms up high in the mountains, it will slowly move downwards because of gravity, obviously. And as it moves, it might carve. It actually pushes rock out of the way. And so glaciers are very important. Nowadays, glaciers are becoming harder and harder to find because the earth is getting warmer year by year. So there are glaciers, for example, in the Alps in Europe, but these glaciers are getting smaller. There are glaciers in the Rocky Mountains in Northern America and also many in Canada. And of course, if you go to Alaska, you can see glaciers next to the ocean. But these glaciers are getting smaller and smaller every year as it gets warmer. Next, we have earthquake. I hope you live in an area that does not have many earthquakes. But an earthquake, this is the after effect of an earthquake. An earthquake is the shaking of the ground caused by the Earth's crust moving, the Earth's crust. Now, in the previous lesson, we talked about the three parts of the Earth, right? Crust, mantle, and core. And we said that the continents on the crust is moving very slowly. It's moving very slowly, sure, but it does move. And what happens is when the Earth's crust moves, right, it might hit another part of the Earth's crust. There's many cracks in the Earth's crust. And sometimes the one crust will go down underneath one, or it might go over another one. Or sometimes they butt up against each other and do this. That's how the Himalayas were formed between India and China, because two parts of the Earth's surface were moving very slowly, but they're moving up against each other. And that's why the land is so high there. So anyway, sometimes when the Earth, whether it's moving under or over, sometimes it gets stuck, right? Because it's rock, right? It's not smooth. It doesn't smoothly go over each other, but it will stick. And for many years, that pressure is building up, right? All this other rock is moving behind it, and it's just stuck because, some parts don't move together very well. And then all of a sudden, that pressure is so much that something breaks. And then that causes a big shock wave, especially at that area. And that shock wave is called an earthquake. And that's why it causes a lot of damage in certain areas. Okay, but that's an earthquake. Okay. Volcano is another interesting feature. Remember again, we talked about the crust, the mantle, and the core. Now, in the crust of the Earth is very deep usually, but in some parts of the Earth, the crust is thin, and the mantle is relatively close to the surface of the Earth. Now, remember we talked about the mantle. It's very hot in the mantle, and part of the mantle is liquid rock. Now that liquid rock is under a lot of pressure, and that pressure wants to be relieved. So if it finds a way to come up through the crust of the Earth's surface, that will form a volcano, and a volcano is basically a mountain which lava can come out of. Remember in the previous lesson, I said lava is molten or melted rock. It's rock that is liquid. It's very hot, and this is a typical shape of a volcano. Usually it has a flat top because inside there's a crater and there are many cracks that the lava can come up. And you see the smoke because it's so hot, right? So that it creates smoke. And when it erupts, lava comes out. Landform. Landform is a natural shape on the Earth's surface. So if you go to certain parts of the world, like the American West or certain parts, deserts in China, you can see some very interesting patterns in the rock. Look at this. This looks strange, doesn't it? It looks like somebody, the flat Earth somehow got tilted. How did it happen? Well, remember when we talked about, I gave you the example of the two parts of the crust hitting each other and rising up and forming the Himalayas. Well, that pressure is enough to make the flat rock turn up like that. And then when water or the rock erodes or washes away, we can see the different layers of the soil that once were flat are now like this. And you can see that's a very interesting part of geology, the study of the earth. And so you can see that in many places in the world, especially dry places where the bushes and the trees and the grass don't cover the ground or the dirt, you can see it very easily. Okay. Next, we have a landslide. Now, landslides are disasters, right? This is when a large amount of rocks fall down a mountain or a slope. So again, our Earth is very big. There's a lot of pressures on the crust of the Earth. And as, a mountain which is made of rock or dirt, over time, right, things wash away, things erode, things get weaker. So the support that's holding rocks and dirt on a mountain slope, that support might wear away, and then all of a sudden those rocks or whatever it is will fall, and that's a landslide. It could be mud too. If there's a lot of rain, the dirt becomes very wet. It has a lot of water in it. It becomes heavier. If it's on a slope, of course, it gets heavier. It might suddenly fall down. And if there's a village or town down below, that is a terrible disaster. Sometimes we read about those in the news. Next, we have erupt. I mentioned that earlier. Erupt is like an explosion, right? Eruption. Erupt is the verb. Eruption is the noun, eruption. So when a volcano erupts, we call that an eruption. It's when the lava and the very hot molten rocks, and rocks, of course, are also forced out of a volcano because of all that pressure in the mantle. All that heat comes up to the surface, and sometimes it comes out very violently with a lot of force, and that, of course, is an eruption. We have a video of that. Check this video out. This is a video of a volcano erupting. Look at how much power there is. Let's take a look. So look, it's kind of looks like slow motion, but we don't really see the lava or the rocks. What we do see is a lot of ash and a lot of smoke. And by the way, that can be very deadly. So if there is a volcano in the area, you have to worry about a lot of different things. You don't want to be caught in that ash because it's very hot. It could burn your lungs. Also, if you're caught in it, there's not enough oxygen to breathe, so you could die because you don't get enough oxygen. And of course, it's very hot. There's hot rocks being thrown out of it. There's a lot of lava coming out of it. It's a very dangerous situation. A very famous eruption in history was the eruption over Pompeii, an ancient Roman city. And that eruption happened so fast and the lava came down so quickly that people died when they were running away from the volcano. And many people just died in their homes. They were just overcome by the fumes. And now it's a very famous archaeological site. But that's also, so volcanoes are very terrible disasters, but they have also been present in human history for a long time. Okay, lava. We've talked about lava several times already. So here we have the word. Lava is hot, liquid rock. It's rock that is a liquid. Imagine that. It has to be really, really hot for rock to turn into a liquid. And you can see the liquid here. It's red, and there's a lot of steam coming off it because any moisture in the air that touches that, it turns into steam right away. It's very hot. And in fact, you can see lava flows. You can see lava flows. That's what we call them. This is a lava flow. You can see lava flows sometimes in Hawaii. It's kind of a tourist attraction. Some people go to Hawaii because Hawaii has many volcanoes, and the lava flows go down to the ocean and they create a lot of steam. It's a very amazing sight. So anyway, lava is a hot liquid that comes out of a volcano. Okay, those are our words for the lesson. Let's continue. The first idea of this lesson, the first main idea, is that there are different changes on the earth, or of the earth. And there are slow changes, but there are also rapid changes. Now remember, the earth has been around for a very, 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 very long time. Okay, I can't put enough varies. You can't even imagine 4.5 billion years. That is something that is incomprehensible to most humans, right? And it has changed over that time, but very slowly. However, there are some times when the earth changes very quickly, and we can see it. So, what are slow changes on the earth? Well, wind and rain cause slow changes. Of course, we've all experienced wind, we've all experienced rain. If you look around after a rainstorm, everything seems pretty much the same. But 100 years, or 1,000 years, or 10,000 years of wind and rain on the same mountain will change that mountain. It will wear away the rock, and the rock of the mountain will change shape over thousands of years because of erosion. We talked about that earlier. Now, glaciers are also very slow causes of change on the earth. And of course, a glacier is a big body of ice. And these big bodies of ice, they do move, but they move very slowly. And they can, like I said, they can change the shape of the earth below the glacier. The weight of that glacier can change the shape. It can also change the material under the glacier. A lot of glaciers in North America that moved from high spots to low spots, they carried a lot of nutrients or rich soil underneath them and spread them out over the plains of North America. And that's why there's very good farming in some states in Northern America. Very good soil, but that soil was carried there by glaciers. Okay, so slow changes on Earth. What are some rapid changes on Earth? We already know. We saw some in the vocabulary. First of all, we have the earthquake, right? When there's a sudden break in that pressure and the Earth shakes. The shock wave makes the Earth shake. That is an earthquake, and that's very rapid. Unfortunately, we can see that happen over just a matter of minutes. A landslide is also something that can happen in just a few seconds, right? When a bunch of mud or rocks or dirt just suddenly loses support and falls down the slope of a hill or a mountain. We call that a landslide. And then, of course, the other example we talked about when we were talking about lava is a volcano. When a volcano erupts, of course, we can see that in real time. We don't have to sit there and watch it for 1,000 years. We can't do that anyway. But we can see a volcano erupt in just a few hours, or maybe over days. But when it does erupt, it's just a few seconds. We can see it, really, just a few minutes. So there are slow changes on Earth, and there are rapid changes on Earth. So when we look in detail at one of those changes, like, for example, glaciers are ice, how can ice change rocks? That's an interesting idea. Ice is really just frozen water. Water isn't as strong as a rock. A rock is heavier and stronger, right? But ice can change rocks. How? Well, remember, water changes into ice when it's cold, and then it melts when it's warm. So this contraction and expansion, especially if the water is in cracks in the rock, imagine that expansion and contraction going on. So sometimes the water changes into ice in cold weather. So when the water changes into ice, right, ice expands and it's pushing the rocks apart, right? But then the ice later on in the springtime, it gets warmer, so the ice melts and it drains away. So after, the ice expanded, it makes the crack bigger, and it gets bigger, and then the water washes away. Maybe the water takes some of the soil or rock with it, so the crack gets bigger. And then rocks with large cracks, and this happens over many years, right? Contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. So the cracks are getting bigger, and then rocks with large cracks, finally, they lose support, holding each other together, and the rocks fall apart. So where you had one rock, now you have maybe 2 rocks or 3 rocks or several different smaller rocks. Of course, this process takes many years. It takes probably more years than you are alive, so we don't really see this. We don't notice it. But it does happen over long periods of time, and rocks will break apart. And especially if the rocks are on a mountainside and they break apart, well, of course, they're going to fall down, make a landslide. So there are these slow changes in the Earth can also cause rapid changes in the Earth's surface. Okay. Let's move on to the reading, and as usual, I'll read out loud. Repeat after me, or repeat along in your mind, and focus on pronunciation, and also think about the vocabulary, the words that we learned today. Let's begin. Earths, that's a little himdro to pronounce, right? Earths. So you stick your tongue out between your teeth, earth, and then you slowly bring it back in to make the S sound. Earths. I'm sorry, I'm doing it too much. Earth's landforms are always changing. They usually change very, very slowly. When continents move against each other, land can be moved upwards. This is how mountains are made. Weathering can change landforms. Weathering is caused by rain and wind. Rain soaks into rock, and the rock wears away. The wind also wears away rock. Mountains can be worn down to become hills. A glacier moves down a mountain very slowly. It wears away the mountain and takes rock with it. Glaciers can make valleys. By the way, that's very interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt here, but you know, I grew up partly in the American West, and when you go hiking in the mountains, there are different types of valleys. You might have a V-shaped valley like this, and there's a stream running through the valley, right? And these are mountains, right? However, in other places, you might be hiking through a valley and you look up and you see that there is a U-shaped valley. Now, if you see and then maybe there's a little waterfall here because this is still high land, right? And here's the valley floor. If you see a U-shaped valley like this, that means it was formed by a glacier because the ice is very thick and wide and moving through the mountain. If it's a V shape like this, that's just the valley was formed by the water flowing through through the mountains, through the rock and carving the river bed gets lower and lower. It makes a V shape. That's just liquid water. But this shape is caused by frozen water. Okay, I just drew a happy face. Okay, so that's interesting. But you have U-shaped valleys. Those are caused by glaciers. Okay, interesting. Sometimes landforms can change quickly. The moving continents can cause earthquakes. The land moves up and down quickly. An earthquake can cause a landslide. Many rocks fall down and landforms change. When a volcano erupts, lava comes up from the Earth's mantle. Lava can make new land and landforms quickly. The islands of Hawaii were made by a volcano. And that's an interesting point too, okay? I don't know the geography or the geology of Hawaii very well, or the geography actually, but you know, you have many different islands, and I'm horrible at drawing, but I'll just do this very quickly. So Hawaii is actually kind of a string of islands, and they kind of follow a line, and that line represents the volcano. Imagine this. There's a volcano at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is very deep. So for a volcano to grow and grow and grow to come up above the surface of the Pacific Ocean, that is a very, very huge mountain. And we don't see all of it. We just see the top of it, and those are the islands of Hawaii. Now, it's interesting because this volcano is moving, or actually the volcano really isn't moving, the landmass isn't moving, but the crust is moving, and that hot spot where the lava is coming up is moving, and that's why it creates many volcanoes, and that's why Hawaii is on a line. Because Hawaii, the islands are getting bigger every year because more lava is coming out and flowing down and creating more rock that sits at the top of the surface. Of course, it also falls into the ocean and builds the mountain bigger and bigger. So the islands of Hawaii keep growing. Of course, very little year by year, but over thousands of years, they will grow more and more. And maybe there will be a new island coming up in the next few thousand years. Who knows? I'd have to do more studies on that. But it's very interesting that the islands of Hawaii were made by a volcano, or a series of volcanoes, really. Okay, well, that's our reading passage. Let's take a look at how it is organized. Here we have cause and effect. So this is a very good subject to talk about cause and effect because we can see that there are slow causes and rapid causes to change the Earth's form. What are some of them? Well, first of all, cause. Rain soaks into rocks. Wind blows on rocks. Now, we talked about rain, especially when it's freezing and melting, but wind also, of course, blows on the rock, and that's a constant force that's, slowly taking little bits of the rock away. So what happens? Rocks, I said it already, rocks wear away. Now, if you're going to be scientific, you're going to say rocks erode. Same thing, right? We talked about that in the vocabulary. So you could say wear away, or you could say rocks erode. And then next we have a beep moves down a mountain and a valley can be made. And remember, I talked about this in the reading. If you see a U-shaped valley, that is because of a glacier. A glacier came through there thousands of years ago and carved the rock out of it, carried a lot of rock, took a lot of rock with it as it moved down the mountain, and it created a U shape in the rock, and that is a valley. A valley can be made. The moving continents can cause what? Remember, when the moving continents, especially when they move up against each other and they get stuck, right? All that pressure builds up, and then all of a sudden it's released, right? Or something gives way, then that can cause what? That can cause an earthquake. Earthquake. And an earthquake, what is an earthquake? What is the effect of an earthquake? Well, the land moves up and down very quickly. And of course, if it's in a mountainous area and the land is moving up and down very quickly, anything on the mountain, if it's not very well supported, will fall down, and you have landslides, and that can cause the earth to change as well. Of course, you can also see big cracks can open up in the earth as well. Okay, finally, the cause, lava. We're talking about what? What carries lava to the surface? It's a big mountain with a flat top. We call that a volcano. Volcano. A volcano carries lava from the mantle to the surface. Lava erupts. It doesn't come out. Sometimes lava will come out slowly, but unfortunately, sometimes lava comes out with a lot of force and it erupts, and you have to be well away from the volcano when that happens. Of course, geologists have very sophisticated instruments and equipment nowadays. They can predict when a volcano is going to erupt, so pay attention to the scientists, to the geologists in your area, because they can warn you if there is a volcano nearby, if it's going to erupt. So lava erupts out of a volcano, and lava is molten rock, right? It comes out, it causes a lava flow, but it's cooling. And if it cools enough, it'll stop and create more land, right? It could create a new island, like the islands of Hawaii. So very interesting. Yeah, if you do get a chance, go to Hawaii and look at the active volcanoes. Be careful, stay a good distance away from them. But it's a very amazing thing to see as the lava comes out and it flows down to the ocean. And remember, Hawaii is just a series of volcanoes that are so big, they're sticking up above the ocean's surface. Okay, very interesting lesson. I hope you learned a lot. I hope that it was interesting to you and it kind of inspires you to learn more about the earth and how it has changed. And of course, inspires you to learn more about geology, which is the study of the earth. And if you study geology, you will study these ideas and these causes and these effects. So anyway, thanks for studying with me. Of course, I hope you learned some good words in English and that it is helpful for you to improve your English language ability. So anyway, thanks for studying with me as always, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.